I'm Steve Sherman, the other half of the Puppet Studio. Creatively, what Greg and I do is, since we hang out at the Puppet Studio 8 hours a day, we just sort of throw ideas back and forth. And at some point, whatever feels right after you've been doing this enough, it all gels and pops in. With Professor Crunch and the Daffies, we had an idea for a science show. And we were thinking of, well, what characters would work, how would it work together? And we're both big fans of the Soupy Sales show, which had a human being and a puppet character. And for us, that's always surefire laughs. So we started thinking about, well, then what would happen if the professor had this lab animal character that he would talk to and go back and forth, and if suddenly these creatures from another dimension popped in and would ask questions about our world that they had known nothing about, and sort of act like the viewer and say, well, what about this, what about that? Whereas most science shows, you have somebody acting as the teacher, and they just sort of tell you things that whatever the theme of the program is. And we felt this way we could get more interaction, characters talking to each other. And then when Steve Kaminsky came into the picture, he brought, these great songs and music to it, which just, took it to a whole nother level. So we started thinking about what would the Daffies look like, how would they act, and then what I do is I just sit down and just hundreds and hundreds of sketches, and Greg looks at them and I look at them and we go, yes, no, what about this shape, what about that shape? And eventually between the two of us, we get a figure that it just feels right. It's all I can say is that you finally look at something and say, yeah, that's the character. And then the building process starts. And during that, there's also changes. Like with Urchin, we originally had little horns on his head and he didn't have ears. And Greg looked at it and said, the horns don't work and he kind of needs ears. So we did that, and so he ended up with ears, because as you can see, the Daffies don't have ears and we didn't want to confuse people. Although they probably do have little ear holes in there somewhere. We just don't show them. Over the years, writing has been almost our number one thing. We got together originally to write when we worked at Sid Marty Krofft. We wrote stuff there, gags and things like that for the various shows that we were working on. And so Greg had written for the Muppets and I had written for comics, and we both felt we really liked writing our own stuff. And we worked for Mattel for a while, writing things for them. And then when we write together, over the years we've tried different methods. When we first started with the early computers, we would both sit across from each other with one computer and sort of type back and forth, and that really didn't work. Today what we do is, since we're both networked on one computer system, Greg can start writing or I can start writing and sit there and just start banging out whatever idea comes into your head, then hand it over to the next person, and then they look at it and say, start writing, and then you send it back, and pretty soon you start getting a theme, you start getting the flow of the characters, it all starts coming together. And it usually takes, maybe 5 or 6 rewrites, polishes. And in this situation, for this show, of course, we'd send it to Steve Kaminsky, and he would add his input to it and send it back to us, and he would put the songs in, and then we would have to see, okay, now that we have this song, how do we get out of it? How do we get into it? And by the end of the day, you have a script.
Is that supposed to be there? I wasn't sure. That's how I was teaching myself.
And then once it's written, then it goes to the puppeteers. And then it takes on a whole life of its own, because each puppeteer brings something to it that you never would have thought when you were just sitting there writing it. And in this case, we had 2 really good puppeteers, Terry Castillo, who we've worked with for a long time, and Minu, who we've just started working with, but she turned out to be a really great puppeteer.
Should we go up? Come on up, kids.
Yeah, that's good for me.
Okay, yeah, if Urchin can be towering a little bit above.
And since she was the youngest, we saddled her with 2 characters to do at once, which we did that just because of a matter of space that we had in the pits for everybody to get into, and just for expediency, and we had to shoot these very fast. And she did a great job. And so what you see is 4 characters performing on your TV set, but what you don't see are 3 people down below all pushed together looking at a television monitor so they can see how to position the puppet. And trying to remember their lines and trying to act at the same time and trying to keep their heads and bodies out of the camera.
I'm Urchin.
I'm Orvin.
I'm Quirk. I'm Bernaline.
So you've got about 3 or 4 different things going on all at once. Meanwhile, you're still trying to perform and keep the character voice and the character's attitude and everything like that. There you go. You've got Quirk, a Quirk puppet, all ready to go in front of the camera. Once we're finished building the puppet and they're all put together and you look at it, there's always a feeling of changes you want to make. Sometimes we have enough time to do that. Other times there isn't. And then once it's finished, you put it on and start playing with it and seeing what it can do, what kind of character it has. In this case, Orvis has rod hands, which we use when you have one puppeteer and you want to move the hand. And what it is basically it's just a steel rod that goes into the hand and is sewn up. And everybody has their own way of doing it. What we do is we have a little clip in there that just clips onto a piece of slotted wood. So we can pull these out if we have to. And rods are pretty, I would guess it was the Muppets that first started using rods for television puppetry, because I think before that people like Bert Tillstrom and Bob Clampett's puppets, they were pretty much, they just had a hand that would just flop around. But I think Jim Henson was one of the first people to bring it to TV. And with enough practice, you can get these rods to do a lot of work.
There'll be a home for you right here.
In this show, we had a lot of songs, and the songs are usually pre-recorded with the music track.
Without that Pete, we'd still be living in a house of stone.
And once it's recorded, you have the timing down and everything. And in this case, what we would do is, actually, since Minou and Terry recorded their own singing voices, they would sing along with the track in real time. Since I didn't sing, I just pretended when Orvis was singing.
And the rest is history.
Hi, everyone.
Puppetry is very interesting because, at least for me, I first saw it when we got our first television set in the 50s. And there's a big difference between what kids see when they see puppets and when they see animation. Animation there's a separation. They know it's a drawing, they know it's a cartoon, it's not real. But puppets on television are really magical because it's what TV is. It's real, it's in real time, it's actually happening, and they actually exist. And so for children, they can bond with that character a lot easier than they can with a cartoon character that's either a 2D or even a computer-generated character. And in terms of performance, since it's an actual actor performing in real time, there's a lot of nuances and things that you can get that you really can't get in animation. And of course, like in this show with Professor Crunch and Urchin, you get that great comedy timing where they can play off each other.
Well, you see, we here on planet Earth live far enough away and we have enough atmosphere that we can live comfortably with the sun.
Yeah, especially in Florida.
This show, it was almost like doing a live television show, which was kind of fun because there's really not a lot of that scene anymore. Everything now is so processed that you don't get that, whereas this is as close to a live television show as you're going to get.
Gotta have a plan, it's no surprise. Use your brain to what remains.
Organized.
Let's get organized.
In order to make it look seamless and easy, of course, it takes a lot of rehearsal. Almost as if you were rehearsing for a live show, because on a live show you can't afford to have any mistakes. So with Kay, Cole, and the actors, we sat down, we first had a reading of the script, went through it, just to hear what it sounded like when the actors would do it in character, and then Kay would start putting them through their paces to see what kind of relationship the characters have to each other, what they would do.
That perhaps they could appear in that pit. So you then have to move yourself out of the desk because they've done something.
How to move them from one part of the set to the other part of the set. And then when we finally got to the set, there was a whole new set of rehearsals that had to go on, because now you have pits where the set is raised off the floor because as puppeteers we have to stand. So we're standing in the pits and the actors are standing on a false floor that's above the real stage floor.
That's spoken, I think.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Just
Was
mine.
Yeah, I have music now.
I have it music, yeah.
So Jay,
Because if it's monotone,
Yeah, it's monotone, and they're still in their little,
Yeah.
still in their harmonics until they break into the questions.
yeah, but
So now they have to be careful when they start moving not to fall in, and we have to make sure we're moving within the space. So the rehearsals were very important, just so the actors knew their lines, where they were going to move, where the pits were going to be. And so when we actually did get there, things moved a lot faster than they would if you just showed up one morning and said, okay, let's shoot this. From an artistic point of view, it's interesting because you start with a sketch with drawings of these characters. Suddenly they exist, they're in 3 dimensions. Then you start with a drawing of an idea you have for where they live, the set, and then you show up in this big garage, and there it is. And it's all lit, and there's a bunch of people, and there's cameras, and there's Professor Crunch, and there's Chloe, and suddenly the puppeteers put the puppets on, and there's Urchin, and there's Bernaline, and there's everybody, and they're all talking to each other and moving around, and you go, wow, look at that. How'd that get here? It's almost like they were always there, and what you wrote was so far in the past few weeks that you've kind of forgotten about sitting down and writing that, and you just suddenly go like, oh yeah, of course, this is always, if I knew this address, come here before, they all probably would have been there.
Everyone on this side of the Earth, it is night. Now you see, the Earth, each day, the Earth spins around on its axis.
Whatever your idea is, and if you really feel strongly about it, you just can't give up. You just have to believe in it and keep trying, and no matter what happens, always feel that at some point it'll happen. Now, you know, you can't starve to death, so you always have to be doing something to keep going, but always in mind that, okay, you know, at some point this is the goal, and whatever it takes to get there, that's what I'll do. And especially in the arts and in show business, it's never a sure thing. It's always, you just have to believe that what you're doing is entertaining and that it's something that people want to see, and keep putting it out there.
Why